For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:05, welcome to today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with my co-host Josh Miller of Fuller Landau. Josh, how are you?
Excellent, thank you.
Excellent. And this evening we present to you Mitch Joel. He is the founder of Twist Image. Mitch, welcome back to CJD.
Thanks, Dan. Hello.
Hello. So we begin with the simplest question of all. Tell us about yourself and about Twist Image.
I have no idea how to answer that question. I'm
very existential.
Exactly. Yeah. Who is anyone, Dan?
Where are we?
Yeah.
Right
why are we?
What is existence?
Twist Image is a digital marketing agency, probably one of the largest independent digital marketing agencies in Canada. Myself and three other business partners started this company in 2000, which is sort of a lie. Two of the guys, Mick and Aubrey, started this in 2000. I joined them in 2002, and Mark, the fourth horseman, he joined probably a couple of years after I did. The vision back in 2002 is somewhat simple. We wanted to create a different type of marketing agency, one that really embraced technology, one that encouraged brands to not just sort of fall into the traditional mindset of let's take a TV ad, no offense, or a radio ad or a newspaper ad, but think differently about how to build your business. And we started using these channels, these newer channels ourselves to promote our business. I mean, I come from a traditional print background where I was writing and publishing magazines, and I thought, well, blogging is a pretty cool way to have an idea and tell a story and publish it instantly for free to the world. And if you're any good, maybe someone will care. And we just started doing that. We started blogging, back in 2002. So it's like 11 years ago, which is crazy, about how we see this new world of how brands can connect better to their consumers. And that really helped create a platform for the agency to be recognized and be acknowledged. And it's led to a whole bunch of things for us in terms of just growth with the clients. The blog has become really popular. We do a podcast every week. I come on the sister station show every Monday mornings and talk with Terry and Heather B, write books, speak, and it's been a great way to promote how we see the world and to grow it. Now, currently, the company is about 100 plus people with offices in Montreal and Toronto, and we service big national, multinational brands tend to be our client base. Brands like TD and Canadian Dairy Farmers and Walmart. Like that.
You talk about digital marketing, and certainly blogging hasn't been around forever. You were probably one of the people that started earlier on. Has it changed drastically over the years? Between the technology or when you say digital marketing between 11 years ago or 13 years ago and today, has been a really drastic change and tough to keep up?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I just wrote a blog post the other day about how the blog is celebrating its 20th anniversary, believe it or not. Now, again, it probably became commercialized and stuff, probably a year or two before I started. But yeah, I think what makes it such an amazing space, I mean, you and I were talking off air about how you enjoy your day because every day is a different day, different client, different challenge. Digital is like that, only compounded because you have different clients and different challenges. But we're definitely seeing a massive transition. I would say that massive transition really is taking place, I think, in the past 5 years, believe it or not, where not only has the adoption been there across all demographics and psychographics. So you have really young kids who are using these devices and you have really old people who are using them too. But one of the sort of things I talk a lot about in my new book, Control Alt Delete, is this idea that what most people don't realize is that technology has removed technology from technology. I mean, if you think about things like your smartphones and your tablets, they're hyper intuitive. There's no instruction manual. You don't have to know a bunch of codes and commands. And if one unplugs, how do you reboot it? Like all that stuff doesn't really exist anymore. It's somewhat intuitive. It's very human. And that has created a cascading effect, if you will, in terms of what we do. I mean, the Facebook of today looks nothing like the MySpace of yesterday. I mean, MySpace was really, it was messy. It was really hard to build a page and do something really cool with it. But you transition to Facebook, and again, really, really intuitive, really natural and easy to use. And I think the changes have been dramatic from a business perspective, even more so, because you have consumers that are going onto these platforms like Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram or whatever, and they are actively connecting and they're actively sharing and they're really comfortable with that. And people say, like, who would want brands there and advertisers there? Well, people do. If they like shows and if they like products, if they're happy to connect with them, if they're going to get an offer opportunity or have something to say, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, and that creates a new dynamic.
It's interesting to say that you came on kind of a couple of years after 2000 after Twist Image kind of started, and they're the four horsemen. Are you all complementary? I mean, the four of you play specific roles or have your specific tasks, and I'm sure you overlap a little bit, but I would think that you complement each other a great deal.
Yeah, we again, I spent a lot of time. I spent over a decade in the music industry, and I was right there watching really amazing bands that we all know and love totally implode and have culture clashes and personality clashes that you couldn't imagine. And one of the things I love most about the relationship that I have with the agency is the relationship that I have with my business partners. And we are really, really close and really, really good friends too. It's not just a sort of working thing where we really like each other. Part of the reason speaks to your question, which is the fact that we always jokingly say that everybody hates what I do and I hate what they do. And that really makes a very complementary thing. And so when I think of things like bands and stuff like that, I'm always like, wow, this is sort of like my little version of the Beatles, where I guess they fought a little bit, but the music they created was great and we don't fight that much.
You have different hairlines too, I'm sure.
Varying, yeah.
Is it hard in a creative medium to have four different partners, four different cooks in the kitchen? Do you often argue about creative projects?
I think it does if everybody. I think one of the challenges you see in other agencies is the fact that a lot of times it's led by two creatives or a creative and a strategist, and that's going to lead to always friction. In our scenario, it's not like that. Mark, who is our CEO, is very much driven on how do you grow this business. Me being the president, but my real thing is business development. I'm like, how do you get new clients and get our current clients as excited about technology as we are? Mick is, we call him our chief product officer. He's the intersection of the creative product and technology and how those worlds come together. And Aubrey is an operations guy. He's making sure that, when someone gets a quote, it's fair and it makes sense and there's profit in it and stuff like that. So we don't have it in that sense, but I would say that, there's another guy in another agency who once said to me that, we're tough on the work and not on each other. And I always thought that was a really great thing to be, because if you're not tough on the work, which is ultimately what we sell, it's sort of, so it's just, it's good. I mean, that's not, as an entrepreneur, you always want to do more and be more. So, we're tough on it, but we're tough on it in a loving way because we want to always try and push a little bit more, whether it's our people to have them be inspired more, or the clients to have them have the latest and greatest, or whatever it is they're capable of without even knowing it.
Is it something that, the four of you that certainly exchange ideas all the time, and thinking back 13 years ago or 11 years ago and today, was it maybe a lot less formal back then? Is it more formal now? Do you guys have set meetings? As your business grows, you kind of have to, take chunks out here and there and make sure that things get analyzed and done. How formal are you guys with getting together and strategy?
Well, we're pretty formal. It's sort of going back. Everything's a music analogy to me. So I'll go back and say, like, we're not like a jazz improv band where it's like, hey, anytime you're ready, let's just go. And we're not like a classical band where we're just following the sheet music as it is. We're more like a rock band, I think, where it's like we all know this is the bridge and the chorus. We might jam a little bit to get to the second verse, but together we have structure. We have our management meetings and our partner meetings on Mondays. I just came from that now. But we work really closely. Our offices are almost connected, and we will often be seen, walking to each other's offices to bounce on. One of the great things about working with people you love and you respect so much is the fact that I've got three mentors built into my business that I can always ask about, whether it's something creative or business-wise or even personal, because after being together so long, we've seen each other without spouses and kids and stuff like that. We've seen real lives be built around it, and people come and go in the business. It's normal especially in a business where you're hiring a lot of young people, and that dynamic is fine, and having people stay is fine. But ultimately, the four of us as business owners are responsible for the outcome. Anybody can come and go, but as the business owners, you're the ones who are really held accountable. And so we try and have some formalities to it, but we also like to be a little bit loose.
Well, and that's important. Listen, the relationship that partners have with each other is actually absolutely huge, and either contributes to the success or impedes it in some way. So I think that's great. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the people side and human resources and see how you kind of manage that in your business.
I'm curious.
Mitch Joel, our guest from Twist Image, here on today's Entrepreneur at 7.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:18. Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur. Inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with you, and our guest is Mitch Joel of Twist Image, and Mitch is the head of course, a modern marketing, digital marketing company here in Montreal. And Josh, should we talk a little about HR? So important in sort of a creative field, because to get the right fit for certainly a creative agency can be tough sometimes.
It's, people can look at it two ways. It's either your number one expense and your number one asset. Just a question of where you classify them, where you prioritize, and what your goal is ultimately for your clients. And certainly in the growth, as you said, you're in a couple locations now, 100 plus employees. You weren't like that, 10, 13 years ago. How did you handle the growth of that increase in employees? How do you keep that culture the same?
I don't know that you do. I don't know that you keep the culture the same. I think that you need to keep a value system the same and hope that your culture sort of maintains. There's a lot of books about culture and how to nurture culture, and the more and more, and this isn't my first rodeo either, but the more and more I watch businesses, I wonder if culture isn't sort of just something that is, and you just got to sort of like pat it along and hope it goes along your merry way. But
it does come from the top, though.
And it's organic.
Yeah, and I do think that there's a certain presence that a brand or a business can create that does speak to sort of what it is. I mean, I don't look around my office and go, this is very contrarian to who I am as a person. It sort of feels like the type of people I'd want to hang out with and the type of work that fits the sort of psyche of the four business partners in our management team and stuff like that. But finding talent and growing talent, it amazes me, because I look at it as, it feels like everything just happened in a snap. It feels like, it is long when you think of 14 years, but it doesn't feel long. It feels like we just started, or we're just getting started. We're sort of going and have a lot more that we want to accomplish. And when I think about what it took to get there, it seems like it was Herculean. However, I'll see other shops that come out and just explode with 200, 300, 400 people, or they acquire a shop and they're like 800 people before you can blink. And I'm always like, wow, how do you maintain the culture, and how do you do it? I think you just do. My whole philosophy that I hope I share with my business partners is that we want to be as big as we can be globally, even so long as we can keep doing the quality of work that we try and put out. And as long as you can balance those two, I'm happy with having hyper growth and things like that. But finding talent and maintaining talent is really hard, and it's especially hard when we're crossing over both creative and technical. So that's two very crazy spaces.
Have you been able to find a way or create policies so that everybody is treated equally, quote unquote, or as much as equal as possible?
You try. I mean, you definitely run into scenarios as you grow that forces you to put in place the things you would hope you'd never have to put in place.
Policy manual.
Yeah, I mean, HR, it's stuff, and again, people always ask me all the time, can I work for you or whatever? And I'm like, I really don't touch HR. And I couldn't honestly tell you what the policy was. I know that, I have two of my business partners who really do that well, because I don't, and I let them sort of run with it. But you sort of hear through the grapevine, whether it's complaints or compliments, about how you're doing on that. And we do, employee surveys and try and figure out how, what's the temperature, how do people feel about the environment?
And I would imagine at some point you kind of cross over from the informal to a little bit more formal.
Yeah, you're definitely not swearing and cursing and being sort of like the way I would be hanging out with my buddies. And I'm also really cognizant of the fact that people have obviously different values and moral systems in place, and I don't want to offend or have anyone go, yeah, he looks really nice on the blog, but in person he blah 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 blah. And to be honest, it's a moral compass that I think comes from, my parents and stuff, where I don't also want to be perceived as that guy. It's not my thing. I always look at life and say, would my parents be proud if I had said that in front of them? Or, now that I have young kids, I think a lot about the legacy that I want to leave. And I hope that people who work in me feel a bit of that, he's respectful of the work relationship versus being wonka buddy. But we have people who are like that, and they're quite comfortable.
You're not in the human resource function per se. That's probably one of your partners, but can you just give a quick comment? Is there talent out there? Is it difficult to find talent for your business?
I think it's always difficult to find talent no matter what business you're in. One of the Jim Collins in Good to Great often talks about, it's not just getting the right people on the bus, but it's in the right seat. And we tend to forget about that seat part. And sometimes we find great people and it just doesn't fit. Sometimes we find people who we think, who knows, we just grab them somewhere, and they wind up being absolutely amazing because they have a hunger and a drive. It's just the dynamics of a bigger environment that I think forces us to rethink what we would hope. Because you come in as an entrepreneur and you're like, everybody's going to be as crazy and as passionate about this as, and they're not. They're just not. It's a great job and they love the environment, but they could go somewhere else tomorrow. And you have to be really sensitive to that and respectful of that. I don't say that in a negative way. I mean it in a really deferential way. Like, we are very much focused on making sure that they are doing their best where they are, and that if they're not, that they're really comfortable saying they're not, because I don't want anybody to be working for me going like, I don't like it here and it's not fun. I'm not being paid enough, or that's not fun.
If you don't stay on top of them or be part of them and be involved with them, then they could go astray, and you don't keep everybody on that same path. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, and it can be somewhat harder for me to do within the organization just because of what I do, and I think a lot of people sort of see a persona of what Fitzjoel is versus me, and so whenever I hear the whole like they're a bit intimidated or they're not sure, I'm like, really? Because I'm just the guy here in jeans. But I can understand that a little bit, because I'm sure I would be the same way if the roles were a bit reversed. So you just try and be yourself and hope people have fun in the environment.
Mitch Joel of Twist Image, our guest tonight on Today's Entrepreneur at 7:24.
Girl.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:26. Welcome back to Today's Entrepreneur. Mitch Joel joins us of Twist Image, and Josh, we're talking about HR, finding creative people, and that process. Certainly tough in the creative medium, but also when it comes to Montreal, Mitch, you probably sort of have a bit of a gift here, given that we have such a creative population, a bilingual or trilingual population. Was that part of the reasoning to in establishing Twist Image in Montreal?
No, I live here. I lucked out. You know, when you think about growing what we would call a national agency in Canada, you know, part of it is being French, and being based in Montreal is a major foothold for an agency like ours, because you have a lot of people who have competitive shops who are national, I'm using air quotes, but they're not. They really don't have a presence in Quebec unless you can really supply and speak to customers in both official languages. You're sort of out on the outs. I just happen to live in the city. I love the city. I've been here my whole life. I speak multiple languages for sure. The talent here is really interesting, because you do have this whole Ubisoft world of gaming and technology, and a culture that was really brought up here, people learning tech, programming, front end, back end, stuff like that. With that, you have a lot of creative stuff here. You have agencies that started originally Cassette, and then your Taxis, and now your Siddeley's, and hopefully one day we would be part of that group. I think we are, but different type. And yeah, it attracts a different creative set, and together it's really powerful. That being said, it's also a challenge, because it's a smaller city in North America, and when you have talented people like that, they tend to not stay here. They tend to go elsewhere, and so it is cheaper to operate here for sure than it is in Toronto, or it would be in New York or Chicago, wherever. But keeping talent here is really expensive, because if they're really, really good, they're going to go.
And you also have a Toronto location as well. Are there any challenges between the Montreal human resource or staff and the Toronto staff? I mean, everybody remain on the same page? Do you have to kind of treat them differently, or
Are we a bit more casual here?
No. You know, philosophically, we always had a philosophy when we opened the Toronto office of it being one office with a very long hallway. And if you ever come to our office, we actually physically demonstrated. We have a massive wall that has a shot live into the Toronto office, and it's vice versa. So it's like a two-way camera. And when you literally look down the hallway, it looks like you're going into another office, but it's actually Toronto. So we try and live it both physically and spiritually, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that for sure there's different crops of talent. You know, Toronto very much is the center of the advertising universe in Canada. And so you're very much able to attract different types of talent there, specifically in client services, I would say, and definitely in creative and copywriting. Montreal, very, very different. Again, very great for technology. But again, you know, we see cross-pollination across it too. And I think it just depends on the company, what type of, if you want to have separate offices that operate, as unique independent units, you can do that. We've always loved the idea of Silicon Valley and digital and startups and collaboration and that type of vibe. And so far, so good.
A challenge that you seem to be overcoming. I think that's great. When we come back on the other side, Dan, I think we'll explore this great agency. How about the marketing that they do, not just for themselves, their clients? Let's talk a little bit about that when we come back.
Mitch Joel of Twist Image, our guest on Today's Entrepreneur. It's coming up to 7:30. Entrepreneur, presented by Fuller Landau, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Josh Miller of Fuller Landau. And our guest this evening is Mitch Joel of Twist Image, a local digital marketing company. And, well, not local, I should say, more international now, Mitch. But Josh, we're talking, well, to get to marketing in a second, but first let's talk a bit about financing, and particularly in the context of these modern economic times. Certainly when companies and corporations start cutting, usually communications, marketing is one of the first places they look.
Unfortunately, and depending on the business, and the entrepreneurs say, you know what, if I can't measure it, if I can't know what my bang for the buck is, well then maybe I got to cut there first and go after the things that I can see and feel and touch. Not always the right decision, the best decision, but seems to be a common decision, which may or may not have affected you, Mitch, over the years. I mean, you've I guess Twist Image has kind of lived through one recession, financial crisis, 2008. What do you see your clients, and how do they react with costs and dealing with trying to, I guess, rationalize their marketing expenses?
It's funny because whenever people talk about that, I think back to I'm one of the past chairman of the board of directors of the Canadian Marketing Association, and that comment always sort of rings in my head because I'm like, it's so not accurate. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, businesses think like that, but the truth is, why we grew and why we continue to grow, significantly through recessions and stuff like that is the fact that everything we do is highly measurable. In fact, I would say everything else is a complete waste of money. I mean, we live in a world where if a consumer is looking for something and they do a search on your product, your service, your competitor, or just in the sort of industry that you serve, you could be present and you would only pay for that ad if someone clicks on it. And if they click on it and you're smart, you could do a data capture on them. You get an email address, something to know about them. You're creating a dynamic sales funnel unlike anything that's ever existed. And so that idea of like marketing is the first to go because I can't measure it is only for stupid people. And it really is. In this day and age, I see people who are so efficient with this stuff that often when I speak to brands, the first thing I'll say to them is, what's your cost per acquisition for a new customer? And they don't even know. Even sophisticated marketers, they don't know. And to me, that's really shameful and embarrassing because they're throwing money away in a world where you don't have to anymore. So had we gone back 15 years, I'd be like, yeah, I see what you mean. You take an ad and you don't know how many people walked in the door because of that or because of something else. Well, I can show you right now today how many thousands of people looked for something, how many of them saw what you did, how many of them clicked on it, how many of those people you were able to convert. And a conversion could be they bought from you, they gave you an email address, could be they watched the video. All of that stuff is so measurable that I'm almost like aghast at brands that think that they can't measure their marketing in a world where they can measure every single inch of it. They just have to want to and be smart.
Does that mean you don't have any price pressures from your customers?
No, you always have that. I think that there's always competition and there's always opportunities. And I jokingly tell my business partners that you could take the logos of all of the top digital agencies in the world and throw them all in the air, and wherever the website they landed on, it'd pretty much be accurate. You do offer similar services and products to your competitors. What you offer that's unique is you, the way you think. Mm-hmm. The amazing thing about this as a service-based industry is that it's really driven by the unique abilities of the individuals within that organization to extract an insight for the brands they represent and drive some sort of result. It is primarily the same reason why 99% of all ads are terrible. It's because finding that insight and delivering it well and having it match is somewhat like striking oil, and you want to try and strike oil every day.
So is it difficult when you were first starting out, and I don't know how much has changed till today, when you're determining pricing, when you're selling a service, you're selling, more than air, wind, and steam, you're selling a thought process, some ideas, creativeness, and I won't say you're selling people, because that's no longer legal, but that there must be some rationale when you're trying to figure out how much do I charge my customer.
Sure.
Might be different today than it was 13 years ago.
I hope so. Yeah, look, the business model is fundamentally very easy. I sell a human unit of time for more money than I pay for it. That is what we do. The complexity of it comes in the size. So when you start off and you're small, you have to sort of earn your keep, and you'll take on, nonprofits, you'll take on opportunities to try different things, you'll try and build a portfolio. As you grow and experience success, you're trying to benchmark yourself against similar organizations of similar size. And, you look to mentors and people like and respect and ask them, what's your blended rate, or how do you work? Is it a blended rate? Is it project-based? Is it retainer-based? And you try and figure out, a model that works for you based off of things like your overhead and your rent and your, all the stuff you got to sort of look at in just the skew of operating a business. But it is a very tough business. It's a service-based industry. The margins can be somewhat thin if you're not careful, and it can be really brutal if you're not smart.
Has your model changed over the years?
Yeah, I think it always does. When we always had a vision to service national, multinational clients with ongoing digital marketing mandates, and we're there now, but we weren't there for a long time. So you would take projects and you would do a project and charge an X amount, knowing that you may not win in terms of margins, but that it would be a great portfolio piece. And the dynamics change over the years all the time. I think you're always looking to, one is increase your rates because you're providing more value, and find clients that are willing to pay for those rates because they feel there's an equal exchange for goods and services. And those tend to be the best relationships where both parties feel, I talk about business all the time, and I say the best deals are the ones where both parties feel like they extracted value. I'm happy to pay you because I got what I wanted. When there's one side that's trying to get something over the other party, real estate's a great example of that, it's really hard. It's very rare. You see two people who bought a home say, like, I was happy to sell it to you for that price, and I was happy, we all got what we wanted. It's like you never hear that. In my business, you're always looking to create that value, and that's why I like it, because I'm not, I tell people all the time, I have very thin skin. I don't have thick skin. People go, it's nothing personal, it's business. Well, you know what? I'm doing that a lot of hours every day, and I take it really personally because it's mine.
And when you first started out, did you have, the four of you were sitting around the tables going, where are we going next? We got to price this. We got to try and make money, but we also have to invest and build for ourselves. Did you have a kind of a plan? Did you stick to something? Did you go out there and say, yeah, we got to try and do A, B, C, D? It might have gone off the rails and you did C, D, E, F. But did you have something kind of set out at the beginning that evolved over time?
Yeah, well, the plan was to bring Mark in, who's our CEO. He was a veteran of the industry. He had done this. He had grown a multi-office agency to worldwide acclaim here in Canada. He was a mentor, a guy that I knew, loved, and respected. Never thought for a million years he would ever be a business partner. When I was sitting down with my two partners, I said, I think this guy would be an amazing foursome for us. And I think he could do all the things you just said, which is clear the brush on all things we had no idea about. He knew how to scale an agency from zero to X amount. And it's, again, I love my business partners, and I really do think it's one of the better business decisions I made, which was giving up a quarter of the company to someone who has experience clearing that brush.
And that's huge. Realizing what you don't know and can contribute and filling that gap is a huge part. So now let's come to marketing.
Sure.
You're doing this for your customers day in, day out. What do you do for yourself? What are the best tools that you learned over the years from 2000 till today that's worked well for you from getting the name Twist Image out there?
Well, we've been really successful in just putting out into the world how we think, and we do that mostly through, my big bald head. And we really treat it as a persona. I don't sort of go like, I walk into a room and I'm Mitch Joel. We really look at it like we have Twist Image as a brand, and we have this Mitch Joel persona, and we have this, what we call the 6 Pixels content engine, which is the blog and the podcast and the books and the speaking and the media appearances and stuff like that. And we just leverage that as a way to get the message out there. I would say most recently what we've done is thinking less about content marketing and more about how we distribute that content. The default was you put it on your blog and you put it in your podcast. The newer way that we've been doing it is I contribute to places like the Huffington Post and Inc. magazine and Harvard Business Review. So now what I'm doing is putting the tentacles of how we think out into different pockets with different business people that may not have heard of us. The book is included in that as well. The 2 books actually would be included in that. And that creates newer types of audiences that we can engage and connect with. And the public speaking has been great as well.
When you were earlier on, were there certain media or forms of marketing that you tried that just absolutely failed, didn't work? You said, you know what, tried it, great, not going to go back to it.
Don't say radio.
Except for radio? No, I'm just kidding. We didn't feel it would be authentic to use traditional advertising as a way to create attention. And the spirit in which we went into it was, I have a passion for creating content, both audio and written. Mostly written. I don't mind audio. I don't have a face for YouTube, so it was never in my sort of brain of doing video, and just the complexity of it as well wasn't my thing. So I think along the course of creating over 400 podcasts, I blog every single day, so we're talking like I don't know how many thousands upon thousands of blog posts and articles. Yeah, I see which pieces work and which pieces don't, but it's a live ecosystem. So I can put out a blog post today and I call it digital tumbleweeds or virtual crickets. Nothing happens. But the next one that I think is sort of asinine or weird or whatever will get like 1 million pickups or shares or whatever it might be. And you learn from those, and I sort of figure out the dynamic. Very candidly, after 10 plus years of doing this, I almost don't care what works and what doesn't. I'm sort of just following my heart at this point and putting out content that I'm interested in doing with the hopes that there's an audience out there that likes the same types of things that I do. But I do think it's important for every business to figure out what the mix is. Not every business has a guy like me that loves to write and loves to create content. And that's where they struggle. They try and do Facebook and Twitter, but no one there actually cares.
And so much to talk about marketing, but as we come to the next break, I think we're going to move on. And after the break, we're going to have Kevin Ammerman. And we're going to talk about websites and websites and kind of mobile and security and all that. Should be interesting.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD 800. Our guest is Mitch Joel of Twist Image. More after the break.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur 748, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar along with Josh Miller of Fuller Landau. Our guest this evening, Mitch Joel of Twist Image, and let's also add in Kevin Ammerman, IT specialist with Fuller Landau, to the conversation so we can talk a bit about websites and mobile websites and security and all things that Mitch is certainly very conscious of. And a lot of news lately about mobile security, even today, about governments hacking into people's cell phones or various it seems like there's a different hacking story every day. So Kevin, how do you even begin to protect your content?
Well, it's not even just hacking that you're protecting yourself against necessarily, but even just drive-by data gathering, I guess, is the best way to put it. So we hear things about even governments and airports collecting information on people's cell phones as they travel through airports. And then we do hear more about the more malicious kinds of hacking. So even just today, I think Marriott Hotels had a problem with some credit card information being lost and things like this. And this seems to happen every week now. And as we're doing more and more transactions online and we're sharing more and more information, and what we're finding is that people are developing very personal profiles online, and people who take advantage of that information, hackers for lack of a better term, have more and more information to pick up and to use against us, which is getting pretty scary.
So does that mean that passwords become useless or that much more important?
Definitely important, and definitely important not to rely on a single password for multiple sites or things like this. But even more importantly is how do you, if you lose that password or if you have to reset that password, what's the extra information that you've given to those websites to help you to recover that password? A lot of sites are asking really inappropriate questions. They're asking things like date of birth, and they're asking mother's maiden name. And these are bits of information that you're leaving with people that maybe you don't want to trust with that information, because if these sites get compromised, that's information that you're giving up that will enable a hacker to get into your other aspects of your life.
And what about from a mobile aspect? I mean, people are so free on their phones and passing by, and as you said, you can go through the airport and get kind of tagged or hacked or call it what you want. How does one protect themselves? How do you protect against that type of intrusion?
It's really, really hard, because even if you're not really using your phone, it kind of has a fingerprint, and it's not too difficult for people to pick up that fingerprint and be able to see where you've been. If they have their hooks into different areas, they can really track you pretty closely and see where you've been. One thing that a lot of people don't really pay attention to is, for example, hotels. As you travel around the world, you use the Wi-Fi services in these different hotels with the same computer or the same phone. And that would allow those hotel internet providers to develop a pretty sophisticated fingerprint of your life. If somebody managed to get into that information and use it against you, it could lead to some interesting times.
Mitch, we're talking about digital security or digital marketing. How important, when you're dealing with clients, do you raise the security issue of back information, websites? Does that enter the picture in your discussions?
It sounds like we're scaring the crap out of you. Good job, dude.
Sorry.
You always have to be sensitive and smart when it comes to your personal information. And I find that because the exchange that's happening online is, I'm going to get all this amazing free stuff, all I have to give them is my information, people seem to have this powerful willingness to do that. Mm-hmm. It's somewhat shocking and surprising to me that people are like, I can't believe Facebook was hacked, and then 2 minutes later they're posting pictures of their kids and stuff on there. And I'm always sort of in this weird headspace of, I really believe that most people don't understand what we're doing online. When I look at it as a guy who used to publish magazines, and I recognize that I am a media entity. when I'm creating any form of content. And people don't like to hear this, but a text message to your loved one is a form of content that's being broadcast across what you hope is a secure channel, but may inevitably not be. And that if you're not aware of that and constantly thinking about that as you create this content, woe is you. And so it is the reality that we are exchanging our personal information in exchange for all of these services, not realizing or recognizing how much valuable information we are sharing across them. And also the fact that we don't necessarily know where this data is, which is another big component that we were just talking about, which is, open Wi-Fi signals, I'm hopping on this, I'm doing that. Those are all creating breadcrumbs. You just have to hope that we live in a world where so many people are doing it that to a certain degree, your pitter-patter of information becomes not as valuable as others. Unfortunately, in a world of credit cards and that, it's unlikely.
And, gullibility still lives amongst a lot of people. And unfortunately, common sense is not so common when it comes to security and protecting your personal information.
And when we come back, we'll of course get Mitch Joel's one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur. That's on the other side at 7:53.
Need a little midwinter pampering? Get it with a little help from Manoir.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:56. Welcome back to today's entrepreneur. Our guest this evening, Mitch Joel of Twist Image, and Kevin Ammerman is here, of course, IT specialist with Fuller Landau, talking about content and securing it online.
And security, always unfortunately not always in the front of people's minds, certainly in the back, but any other areas there are people, that entrepreneurs or people should be aware of when it comes to security, Kev?
Well, speaking to business owners and people who are developing websites and trying to sell things online, it's a good idea to be conscious of what information you should be collecting and keeping on site and what you shouldn't. So in order to limit how big a risk that you are to your customers, don't ask inappropriate information. Just ask for what you need, provide the information that your customers are expecting, and go that extra mile to try and help them out. But if you don't really need to ask for personal information, then don't ask for it, and definitely don't keep it on hand.
Well, because that's just it. You have all this information, all this very sensitive information that you've gathered. There is a responsibility level, social, legal, otherwise, that you got to make sure this doesn't get out.
Yeah, you've got to make sure that this stuff is secure. You are, as you collect it, you are responsible for it, and you can expect there to be consequences if it gets into the wrong hands.
Is there something easy that business owners can do, whether it's a separate server, whether it's locked up somewhere? Is there anything that maybe they can ensure keeps this information very private and very secure?
You've got to look at the whole picture, and you've got to make sure that you dot your I's and cross your T's and all of that stuff. There's big companies that, in theory, have a lot of people working on these kind of questions, and they still manage to lose a lot of information. So it is a very good idea to take a close look and make sure that there's not files being saved in places they shouldn't be, or people having access to information they shouldn't at any time.
Having information in the cloud, so to speak, that's certainly a buzz term that everybody's become familiar with. Is that actually more secure or less secure?
If it's done right, it's more secure. But there can be gaps in the security, and you've got to look at it from end to end and make sure that everything is all bottled up tightly. Something
that you should check from time to time. I mean, is there a frequency that people should check things?
As frequently as you would check your cash register, right? Your money is coming in and out of there, so yeah, it's a good thing to keep an eye on.
Excellent. And as we come up to the last moments of today's entrepreneur, we glean over to Mitch Joel and ask him, what one piece of advice, at least one piece of advice, would you give to today's entrepreneur?
Well, as you know, I thought long and hard about this question, preparing for the show.
Months
and months. I think the best advice that I could give any entrepreneur is something that I came to realize much later in my career, and I hopefully have a long way to go still. But it's simply put, the ability to present, to be a very good public speaker, to spend the time understanding what it means to build a story, tell a story, and share a story. When I look at people we would all sort of laud as the best of the best, typically these are people who can get up in front of an audience and tell a very powerful story that would get the audience members to be a part of that story. And it's funny to me, being a person who speaks professionally as well, how lacking that skill is taught both in school and in the business world. The ability to present, I think, is everything. So there are great books. You could check out Dr. Nick Morgan, Gar Reynolds, Nancy Duarte. Check out their stuff online, and they will shepherd you into that promised land.
I think that's great. And a couple of takeaways that I get, Dan, and certainly in talking with Mitch, is he's comfortable. He loves what he does. So certainly passion. Entrepreneurs become second nature. You don't distinguish between work and life. It just happens to all mesh together. And the last comment is, that kind of came out very briefly, is you got to know what you don't know. And you got to not be afraid to have other people fill in those gaps of what you're missing in your own knowledge and ability base. And I think that it's an excellent example in Mitch and Twist Image. So thank you very much for that.
Mitch Joel of Twist Image, thanks very much for stopping by. It was a pleasure. Kevin Ammerman, IT specialist with Full Orlando, thanks again. Josh, we're back next Monday night at 7. The Exchange is next on CJAD 800. It's 8 o'clock.
Good evening, it's 8 o'clock. I'm Kelly Lupari. A few clouds tonight. It's minus 11 downtown. Full weather coming up after the news. Here's what's making news right now. Layoffs at Bixby. More than a dozen Love to Whore children ordered to be returned to Quebec. And heroin found in the apartment of actor Philip Seymour Hoffman. From the CJD 800 Traffic Center, here's Kira Yeager.
No congestion, no stalled vehicles, no accident. We simply do have one situation, though, you should be aware of if you do want to take Notre Dame Street near Angrignon. It's closed off completely, so you cannot use Notre Dame past Angrignon at this time. And elsewhere, though, as I mentioned, we are looking good. I just want to mention as well that the inbound Champlain Bridge will be reduced to one lane overnight tonight from 11 until 5. And if you have an update, call it in. Star 800, a free call with Bell Mobility. Take advantage of Via Rail's escape fare. No traffic, no stress, and from $39 one way to Toronto. It's a no-brainer. Details at viarail.ca. Traffic and transit every 15 minutes on CJAD 800. Next report, 8:15.
In the news, a dozen employees of the company that runs Bixby have lost their jobs in a round of layoffs announced today.
Denis Coderre wasn't sure why he had to confirm the job losses instead of Bixby's board of directors, but he did. 12 jobs will be lost, 2 full-time and 10 part-time. That includes Bixby CEO Michel Philibert. Coderre said that as Bixby's principal creditor, he had a responsibility to set the record straight.
My main goal now is to make sure, and we will do it, we are saving Bixby Montreal for the season, for this summer season. In the future weeks, we're talking about 2-3 weeks, I will already make some statement. We will take some decision at the executive committee for the future of Bixby Montreal.
Coderre said he didn't see the point of putting an elected official on Bixby's board, something opposition leader Richard Bergeron has pushed for. He said the executive committee and Bixby's parent company are working together to ensure its future, at least for this summer. At City Hall, Patrick Layton, CJAD 800 News.
It's 8:02. An Ontario judge is ordering the children of an ultra-Orthodox Jewish sect to return to Quebec. Members of the Love to Whore community left the province last fall while they were being investigated by social services for health and education issues. The judge has put a 30-day stay on the order to give the families a chance to appeal. Montreal police shot and killed a man this morning just outside the bus terminal near the corner of Barrie and Ontario streets. Several calls to 911 shortly before 11 this morning reported an agitated man wandering on the street while holding what looked to be a hammer. This witness told CTV News that a confrontation ensued and shots were fired.
So they talk to him and they say, hey, like, we don't want you in the hostel. We can't give your deposit back because you essentially destroyed a door. And that's what really set him off. And he said, oh, you're not going to give me my $50. Is this window worth $50? Is this window? And he was bashing all these windows in.
The victim was taken to hospital, was pronounced dead a couple of hours later. He was known to police. There have been a number of recent data breaches exposing thousands of usernames and passwords in plain text on the internet. There are calls for beefed up online security.
The password, as we know it, is dead.
Jose Fernandez is a cybersecurity expert with the Polytechnique School in Montreal. He says as long as the password alone sticks around, data breaches will continue. His solution, two-step authentication.
You would use a device that you purchase, or you would use your phone, And that phone generates a one-time password, as it called.
But then the problem is compatibility. Right now, it's not user-friendly.
We want, as users, to have one app on the phone in which I have a code for my Google and a code
And
for
until
my,
all sites that store your personal information don't jump on the boat, he doesn't think the situation's going to get any better. Michel Boyer, CJ 800 News.
Bell Canada says it's contacted all of its small business customers whose email accounts were compromised by hackers. New details have been revealed on what was found in Philip Seymour Hoffman's New York City apartment when investigators discovered his body. Reporter Aaron Katursky.
Philip Seymour Hoffman was found with a syringe in his arm, and police detectives found in the apartment numerous syringes, drug paraphernalia, prescription pills, and some 50 bags of heroin. Hoffman struggled with addiction and told interviewers last year he developed a heroin problem that led to time in rehab. His family called the death tragic and sudden.
Send your tips and photos to your story at cjad.com. From the Dormez-vous Weather Center, a few clouds tonight with a low of -12, mainly sunny tomorrow and a high of -6. Temperature downtown right now is